Good morning. Thank you for tuning in. And today you will learn so many lessons that you will use to completely shift and change how you see the topic of blame and fault. Because I have the expert who will tell you what does it mean, the structured psychology. Today we have the guest, Follansbee. So he is a PhD author and expert. He graduated the University of Navarra, which is in Spain, by the way, with a master's degree in philosophy. In 1971, he acquired the master's degree in clinical psychology from the University of Madrid. In 1974, he defended his dissertation with the excellent grade. In 1980, he moved to live in the US with his family, and I believe it's one of the best decisions that you made, but we will come to that. And today we will speak about his groundbreaking and profound theory, which is the structured psychology, and about his book, which is titled, It Is Not Your Fault. Welcome to the show, and I want to start with this. Blame, fault, it's everywhere. Once people fail, they kind of start to search for somebody whom to blame because they don't want to think that it's their fault. Is that something that we were even conditioned since we were kids? Or it comes as the coping mechanism for us to protect ourselves because we don't want to realize that whether it was our fault or we don't want to blame ourselves?
Well, that's a good question. It's a wonderful question. It's a question that we hear frequently as psychologists. And let's talk about that and see how it works. The reason why my book is titled It's Not Your Fault is to drive the reader to understanding that we are structured as human beings, as living beings, in very specific ways. And that structure includes our relational world. It includes our need to relate to the outside world. And it is constructed in such a way that who we are genetically, which is something that we are born with, that we arrive in this life with, as baggage, if you wish, is unable to live unless it is in relationship with the world around it. So just genetic baggage is not enough for life to take place. We must relate. All living things must relate with the outside world. So when we hear someone say, I didn't do that, it wasn't my intention, it wasn't my fault, on and on, it's not because they're inventing anything or trying to evade anything. They are telling you that there is something that they didn't want to do, that they do not want to be responsible for, nor that they are responsible for from the outside world that is not theirs anymore. So when someone makes an error, we call that a contradiction. It contradicts one of our needs and one of our wants. That is to say, it contradicts who we are. And that tendency for us to look beyond ourselves isn't to protect ourselves. It is to communicate to those that are blaming us, which is something we're trying to avoid, just exactly what is going on in a real world, our real world, everybody's real world. So that's one of the reasons why you see people apparently shift the blame. They're not really shifting anything. The blame comes from outside of us. We never do anything to hurt ourselves.
You mentioned who we are, and more I go, more I feel completely stuck. I cannot even explain who I am. Every time when I speak to experts and they ask who you are, I start to mask what I achieved, who I am professional-wise, what I can do, everything but myself. Why is it so hard to understand who we are? Is it because we were conditioned who we have to become, the pressure and also what others expected as a society because we are still part of the society? Or because we were not taught even to understand who we are since we were kids?
Well, I think it depends greatly on how we define who we are. That is to say, what are people looking for? What are we looking for when we ask ourselves, who am I? That particular need or desire comes from outside of us. It is the outside world that demands from us who we are, as though that made any kind of a difference at all, or we had some sort of an obligation to define exactly who we are. I do this in a more palatable way, you could say, by simply telling people to identify what they want and what they feel they need. And what they want and what they feel they need is the best way to immediately understand who you are. And there you can make a list, and that list will be very long, and it will describe perfectly the person that you are and need. So it's curious that the outside world and our outside world, that is to say, part of who we are, is demanding constantly some sort of identity, some sort of way of saying, this is who I am.
I believe the identity crisis, which is at the moment one of the top topics to discuss in the world because of all the information that we see on the internet, we share, and somehow everyone feels that they need to express their opinion. If you don't, you are left behind, you don't have the opinion, and all that comes with that. So is it something that we can change and help people follow just only with the flow without the pressure that you need to understand who you are, you need to understand what are your goals, otherwise, and then the blame comes with all the consequences, and then the person starts to feel, oh, is it my fault, is it not my fault? How to help people to ease their transition from what they were conditioned to see themselves as, who they are in reality, so to understand your inner even voice, your inner purpose, and then who you become. Because who you were, who you are, and who you want to become could be very different identities.
Yes, it could, and it is. I think if we understand that we are structured, all of us, every single living thing on this planet is structured in a very specific way. And in my book, It's Not Your Fault, I explain how that structure works. It's a very simple structure, and it works for all living things. But in the process of understanding how we're structured, we also understand that the way we behave, the way we feel, the way we relate to the world around us is a product of that structure. It is not something we decide to do. It's something that the structure that we are born with and that is part of who we are drives us to do. So if we are hanging on, for example, to our lives, if we are doing everything we can to maintain the life that we are living, that is usually called survival instinct, if you wish, isn't a survival instinct at all. It is a requirement of the structure that we are a part of. It's called continuation. So that's part of the structure. We're not at fault for having a need to save our lives if we possibly can. It's not our fault if we defend ourselves, because that is part of the way we're structured. It is simply the way we are put together that drives our behavior in general, wherever we are and whatever we're doing.
I love that part, because wherever the limit starts and ends for you to protect yourself, and it is because of the structure that we were gifted by the nature. We are all coming from the nature, and the nature didn't make the exception to structure one person differently. That's why once you understand the structure which comes from the nature, you can somehow influence the structure and then use it to achieve the goals that you have before you. But where the limit ends, that it's still not your fault, versus if I accept that it was my fault, somehow I can change my behavior, even though it comes with the structure. But there is still something that I need to take the responsibility for.
Yes, well, we are all responsible for our acts. There is no one that's going to take that away from us. But we should know individually, not according to the outside world, but ourselves, that what we are doing is demanded by who we are and how we're put pieced together, if you wish, psychologically. And that's part of the structure. So no matter what we do, what we think, or how we behave, we are simply following the needs that we have as human beings or as living things. And sometimes those needs go against, we could call it social norms or laws or values. It's just the way life is now. Sometimes we find that we don't get along at all with the outside world that we're living in. There is something about our genetic past, something about our makeup, something about who we are that does not happily coincide with the outside world. Well, there's an option that we can take. We can change that outside world. We can go somewhere else. Be with different people, be with different values, be with different requirements, and we may find that we are now able to be who we are and be applauded for it. So it depends very much on where you are and the reason or the basic responsibilities that you feel depends initially on where your behavior takes place, under what conditions your behavior takes place. That's what makes the difference. It is not entirely you, it is how you're structured.
So let's dive into the structure a little bit, because I believe that was my first eye-catching, oh wow, this is something that I want to learn a little bit more, because any person can benefit once you understand what is the structure, what drives you, why do what you do. Because next time if you face the same and you understand what was behind my behavior, you might change something. So what is the structure that we speak about?
The structure basically is very simple, and it comes from the way existence itself is put together. So if you examine existence itself, you can very easily see, very quickly, that it is relational. That is to say, everything that is in existence, very especially everything that is alive and in existence, must relate to the outside world, must relate to everything that is around it, or it cannot exist. So if there is a being that is intentionally driven to live, it must do so relationally. So that's the first thing. We are relational beings. We depend on the relationships we have. The second thing is that we have not, I would call it an instinct, but a structural drive to continue being who we are. So there is no such thing as what you would call a special kind of psychological or innate need to continue living. There is not a survival instinct. What there is a structure that tells you that you must continue, or you can't be who you are. You can't. There is no way to substantiate or continue being the reality that you are. There's this natural tendency for you to continue. And for we human beings, the third element of the structure is what we receive back from the world that we're relating to. That is to say, what kind of echo, what kind of confirmation do we get from the world outside of us that is responsible for constantly confirming or denying or contradicting who we are. So basically the structure is that. It's relational, it's continuing, and it's confirming. And if any one of those three elements is missing, then we have a serious psychological problem that we have to deal with.
And that's, I believe, everywhere, because people behave the way that they do and they don't want to accept who they are, because the way that explains who they are, it's not very pleasant to them. How to help the person it's not like to feel the fault or to be blamed for, but still understand that society is what you put in, and then it affects, and then this is what you receive back. So if there is misbalance between either parts, you will not get what you want, and also the response will not be the beneficial for both sides. There is no one side in any relationship. There are always both sides affected. So if the person, first of all, doesn't belong to that part, obviously they need to change. But sometimes it could happen that the person doesn't understand who they are. So if they change the perspective, how they show in the world, without being pressed to do something, but still understanding that they belong to part of the society, so they relate to that. They need to behave the way that they want, and then they will be accountable for the results that they accept, and they feel perfect. So that's kind of the equation for the relationship. You bring, you affect, and then it comes back. So what would be the recommendation for the person who don't know how to behave? They don't like how the world see them, but somehow they don't understand how to change because the structure drives them.
Well, I think that is not an uncommon problem. That is probably man's most common problem. That is to say, getting along with others, getting along in life. And of course, we're responsible for everything that we do, but we're responsible for those things that we do because we are structured that way. So in reality, nothing that we do to hurt someone else or to be unaccepted by the society that we live in. We're just trying to get along. And the minute that we understand that we're just trying to get along and that we're just following our structure, the same structure that everybody else follows, the differences between people and what makes conflict is the fact that each one of us is genetically different than the next. So that even though we're driven in the same way, all of us, in exactly the same manner, through the structure that we all share, because of our genetic backgrounds, each one of us is different. And each time that we go out into the world and relate to that outside world that we're in relationship with, we will react and behave differently than the next person. And society will accept or not accept the way we behave according to the way each member of that society is structured as well. So this is the dynamic of life that we are so accustomed to seeing and not understanding. And yet it's totally understandable once we understand that we are structured in a very specific way, but each one of us is genetically different. So each one of us has different needs and different wants. That is the identity that we have, and that is the identity that we are not responsible for. This is the way we were born. We're trying to deal with that in the very best way we can.
That's very interesting, because more we don't accept that that's our responsibility and it's only the structure behind, more we will have people who might misbehave and then still say, oh, that was the structure. So how to differentiate between misbehavior and the structure that drives you? Because if you misbehave and you hurt people, even unintentionally, which you think that you did unintentionally, but still you hurt the person. Because there are some people who do it on purpose, even if they don't accept that they do on purpose, or they have different perspective how they see the world. So where is the limit that you need to meet your structure without interfering with the structure of the other person?
Well, that's a very difficult thing to do. What you're proposing is almost a utopian existence. And I think it sounds wonderful. And that is and should be our goal. But we have to understand that, for example, why would John hurt Mary? Let's just make something up. What's wrong with that relationship? Well, John has felt hurt. Something Mary did hurt John. That's why John is reacting. And the way we react is we hurt back. We try to neutralize the pain that we feel. And oftentimes that leads simply to another contradiction, because Mary doesn't want any of that either. What happened in the contradiction that she just received, she will hit back to John now. So the battle has begun, and a world war between two has just been initiated. But this is part of the human condition in general. This is the way we are. What you describe, I would love to have. And it would be wonderful if life itself had that goal and that we were all trying to reach it. And in reality, that's exactly what's happening. But there's a problem. And that problem is that each one of us have a different world around us, a different social milieu, or if you wish, a different environment that we depend on entirely in order to maintain our existence. And yet, because each one of us is different, and each one of those persons that forms part of that society, part of that environment, is different as well. And that's the perfect cocktail, if you wish, for conflict. So I understand your desire. It's the same one I have. I think it's the same one everyone has. To have happy, non-contradicting lives in which everything goes the way that we would like it to go. But what you would like to go and have happen to you may not coincide with what I would like to have happen to me.
And still we have to coexist, right? Because what makes me happy, it might make you unhappy. And
Exactly.
then we still live in the society where we have to relate, whether we want or we don't. We still bring some value and we take some value. And if you find that there is a balance between what you bring and you can take, that's where you have to belong. That's where you have to stay. That's why so many people speak about the belonging. If the environment is wrong for you, change it, because life is so short, and you might end up finding that you are not who you are, and now you are conditioned even to be completely different, which was your condition since you were a child, and then you would live for decades lost without any idea where to continue, and you will start to feel, oh, life is not what I expected and I am unhappy. So if you hear the expert's opinion and they tell you this is how it is, it's not by accident. It's because they work with so many people and they see that there is a pattern behind why that happens. It's not by accident people wake up in the morning and they decide, oh, let me give my opinion. People spend their time, they read so much literature, they analyze and they put all together and they publish the book. So if there is any option that you can get the book in your hands, go for it, because I really loved part of the book and it was eye-opening for me as well, because one of the part it tells about the leadership as a conflict resolution.
Exactly.
Let's go, like, leadership mostly it relates to making everyone, not everyone, because it's impossible, let's admit, what makes me happy might make the other person unhappy. So where is the balance between what the leader has to take the action towards, where they have to keep neutral, because still have to balance that as well. You cannot react on everything that happens, and how to resolve the conflicts which have no solution.
Well, asking me the question of the year, or perhaps of the century, I am not qualified to answer your question correctly with the kind of wisdom that one might have. I think we found from the beginning of time that leadership is not a perfect situation to be in. You cannot, as you have very accurately described, please all the people all the time. That would be wonderful, but you can't. So I think everybody who is involved in what we could call, in one way or another, a free society, decides to pander to the majority of people if they can. That is to say, they will try to please the majority, knowing that they are not going to please the minority. And there is no perfect solution, I think, or scenario in which there can be a leader that wins every time. I think we can only find those leaders that please, as best they can, the majority of people they're trying to lead. I can't see where there might be a situation in which a leader could lead all people correctly and as he should all the time.
So let's say I'm a leader and I have minority and I have majority. Mostly, whether we want or no, somehow the majority is formed based on the leadership skills that you have, because otherwise it's impossible to create the majority, because they are created by, oh, I trust that person. The vision that the person has, it resonates with me, so I want to follow the person. And then you have the minority, which you still have to balance. You cannot just ignore them. And let's say they came to a point that the majority which the person led, somehow they fall for the misleading, not the information, but still something happened, and it conflicts with the way that you see the vision for the team you are leading. And then you have the minority, which was mostly not seen so much. And then you have the majority, which somehow is in conflict. So what would be the suggestion, like the recommendation, what the leader has to do? Still take the responsibility and be fair in the situation, even if it creates the conflict with the majority, or still satisfy the majority, because then it will kind of conflict and then you will not have more fire with the situation.
Well, yes, I think ideally speaking, our best bet is always to try to please the majority. But let's just take a fictitious scenario to see if any of this is possible. That is to say, the politics of the majority or minority. Just take two people. Can you find two people that are exactly the same? That's two people. Not 2 million people or 2,000 people. That's two people. So if you can't find two people that are perfectly aligned in their desires, their needs, their wants, you certainly can't find more than two that would qualify as being equal and therefore led in a specific way that pleases them. So leaders of mass amounts of people or huge significant societies really are in for conflict. They will never get it right according to some people, and according to the other people they will get it partially right. But there will always be an error somewhere. There will always be something that isn't exactly the way that person wants or needs or desires. Humans are conflicted in general. They just have a structural difficulty in finding something that is perfectly equal to themselves. And we have to accept conflict, in my view, as part of life itself. It makes life interesting. Life would be just a terrible bore if we went our way all the time, and if everybody else had their way all the time as well. So I think accepting the way that we're structured, understanding that way, what it's made up of and how it works, we have a much better chance at forgiving other people, understanding why sometimes we think that Jerry or Sally or Sam is so bad, so irritating, so annoying. Understanding the structure, we can understand why they are behaving that way. They're just trying to keep themselves together. And understanding the way that we are put together, the way we behave, the way we think, the way we feel, which is what I describe in my book, is a much better tool to use to get along in life than trying to change what is not changeable. That is to say, try to change the structure of life when the structure of life is always the same.
Yes, and then you will end up feeling unhappy all the time because you are fighting. There's only something which you simply cannot change, and the only thing that you can change is how you see it, and then try to live. If it's something that you can not live with, try to find different place, the environment, change people around you, and then life starts miraculously change, because that's what I learned the hard way, by the way. I want to speak about the forgiveness, because at the moment in the world, it's kind of the everyone's about the leadership in the companies, with the relationship even. One is the leader, the other person is to be led more. So where comes in the forgiveness? Whether do the person needs to tolerate, or what is the part that the forgiveness plays in the relationship, in the family, in the company itself, and even in friendship?
That's an excellent question, and it's one that is the principal subject of the book itself. It's not your fault. And I suggest people do with that book, and as a result of reading that book, is to use the information they learn in that book. And that information basically is in relationship to the reasons why people behave the way they do, why they feel the way they do, why they are the way they are in respect or with respect to the world around them. So if, for example, in a company that you're working, there is constant conflict in that company. I understand that. There's constant conflict in life itself. So of course there will be in a company, or where there ever is enough people reunited
more than two
with one's goal. Yes. If you understand why conflicts occur, what conflicts are, and how to deal with conflict in a structural way, in a way that makes sense, you stand a much better chance of getting through life than those that don't understand what the rules are, that don't understand the reasons why others are behaving the way they are, why your boss just yelled at you. It may not be you at all. It may be his wife that gave him a problem in the morning just before he left work. But you are there, you are part of that outside, his outside world, just like his wife is. So you're a target for getting yelled at. If you understand that, if you understand the way we're put together, the way we're structured, you stand a much better chance of just letting that go and keeping on with your work, and not letting that become a major issue in your life.
What is the percentage of alignment between your inner structure and the outside world structure has to be in, let's say, a sweet spot to live happy life?
I love your questions. Beautiful. I have never done a study on that, and I think what you're asking is what the formula is to creating a utopia.
I'm tending there.
Well, this wasn't your intention. And I think what you're looking for is an answer to having lives that are less conflicted. And I think that makes all the sense in the world. I think that's what we all desire.
It's more like, because people live, let's say, unhappy life, and they don't understand where is the limit, like the threshold that you have to quit. You shall never tolerate that. And then obviously, where is that edge, like because even 50%, it's already a lot.
Yeah, it is. And they could insist in this. If you understand the structure itself and how it deals with the outside world, you'll understand all the things that have been a mystery to you. Why this has happened to me. Why my best friend all of a sudden is my worst friend. What happened? Where problem? That creates a tremendous amount of anxiety and it's worry and complexity in one's life. But once you understand how that works, that worry, that complexity, that anxiety disappears. And you may not be the happiest person in the world because of your understanding of the structure, but you will be able to finally get along. You will finally be able to understand others and why they do all the things that they do that mystify you. It's basic need to For one to get along in this life, understanding the way we're put together really is a fundamental.
I love the part that you mentioned, understand the other person, because mostly we hear that men complain about not being able to understand females. So you intend to tell that if you understand the structure, then you can understand females? Because that would be revolutionary. Sometimes I cannot understand myself.
Exactly, but that's the point. That's wonderful. That's a good thing you just brought up. Understanding yourself. Sometimes we're just, all of us, why did I do this? What's wrong with me? I should see a therapist. I'm disaligned. There's something wrong with me. But if you understand the way you're put together and you understand your needs and wants, who you are genetically, it becomes completely, all of a sudden, but completely clear to you why you felt or thought or did the things you did. So it's understanding the structure that is fundamental, that is basic to being able to unravel that mystery.
So I believe whenever the child goes to kindergarten or the school, the first they need to be handed your book to understand who they are before they start to understand how to read. Because unless you understand who you are, why you do something, it's harder, because all the behavior starts to pile up, and then you are completely with who you are by nature. Whatever you were conditioned, and now everything comes at you, and you don't even have the time to understand who you are. And that's the problem of 70% of the population, and that's unfortunate, because people don't have the time to understand who they are and how to live the happy life with who you are and who you want to become. Which part of the book, what are the takes away? Because I highly recommend, when I started to read the book, I was like, that's something that you don't expect. It's not the title. It claims that you understand what is in the book. But the book is the pure gold and the treasure, because it's full of the lessons which is not in the title. And the lessons that you want to learn are on the pages book. So go for the book, 100% highly recommended. But what is the takeaway which is unexpected from I read the title and I assume that I understand what is in the book? What is one contradicting finding or the takeaway that the person can learn from your book, which is absolutely unrelated to the title?
Well, a title kind of covers everything, so it's a difficult task, I think, for one to find something that is not attached to the title, that is related to the title in some way or another. But I think that the one thing one comes out of after having read the book is the importance that the outside world has for us. That is to say, we, relational beings that we are, live in any other way. No living thing can continue their existence unless they are in relationship. That puts the outside world and the object of your relational activity as absolutely necessary, as an absolute requirement, life itself. And in understand that once you comprehend the reasons why you and everybody else, not just you alone, but everybody else, is structured in exactly the same way. Each one is trying to maintain their own identity intact, trying to maintain what they need and what they want as the best they can, which very often is in conflict with what you need and want. If you can understand that and understand the importance that had in your life, you will find a common ground that will relax finally and finally take away the anxiety that you feel from not understanding what the world is all about.
I wish somebody can understand what the world is all about, because that would be, I believe the person can definitely win the Nobel Prize for that. How people can find you?
Well, the best way, I think, is to Amazon book, if you ask, it's their fault if you put that in the title and then put my name. Just put Rogers, Rogers. There's several books with that same title. That's a perfectly good way to at least get the book. And for more information in general, if you go to my website, structuredpsychology.com, there is everything you need to understand not only the way we're structured, but good examples, proper examples of the structure and how it can be used, the examples that we give, and the case scenarios that are shown there that you will probably find very easy to understand and very familiar. So also I think the website is a good place to go to get that information.
And let me ask this as we're wrapping up, because relationship is something that every person is interested. Like, there is no person in the world that at some point you are not looking for the relationship, whether it's intimacy, whether it's friendship, whether it's to be able to talk to your coworkers or people around you. We are still social beings. So what is the structure? What to look in the other person that will tell you, oh, this is something that is not going to work out? Absolutely. Like, together with a green flags list, like what are red flags that you normally look in the person, and it tells you with 99% accuracy that that person is not for you because you already kind of structure.
I think that if you can learn things, you have to be in a relationship with that person to learn about the person. That's the very first thing. But that we all know. But if you understand what needs and wants that person has, you understand her genetic background and point of departure in any relationship that person may have with you. So if you really want to save a lot of time, talk to that person, find out what their ideals are, where they want to go, what the goals might be. Understand that, and you'll see whether or not they coincide with what you want and what you need. And if they don't, you can see that there's going to be a percentage of times that you are relating to this person that you'll be in conflict with this person. Your needs and wants will not coincide with the needs and wants of that other person. And that is the basis for all conflict.
And when experts tell you that the needs and wants, if they are not met, and you just fake that, oh, I will learn, I will fake, I will find out how to trick it, how to change it, that's where all the problems start. Understanding that you are driven with your behavior by the structure which you inherited since you were a child, and starting to work with your own structure and align with how you see the world, how you behave, and how you can use it for your own benefits, that's where you have to start. And not what are the needs of the other person. If they are conflicting, it's better if you just split from the very beginning and not blame or find your own fault that I did this wrong, he or she did that wrong. No, it's the structure behind every person's behavior, and more the structures are aligned, this is where the magic happens. So search for people, search people who understand your structure, and you have so much similarity that you will not end up in the conflicts all the time, because life is so short. Find your people, read the book, learn the lessons, and live happily ever after. Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you want to leave us with?
No, I think you've been very, very, I think I just leave you with one thought, and that is that the structure itself is always the same. Each person has the same structure as the next. What changes is the psychological standpoint, is the genetic background of each one of us. That's what changes. So you will never be, even if you're a perfect twin, you will not share all the genetic material that you have, even with your twin, and much less with your next door neighbor, or with a brother, or with a sister. So that's an extremely important point to keep in mind. The structure is always the same. You'll always be relational. You'll always continue trying to exist, and you'll always need relational comeback from those things that you're in relationship with. That everybody has to do. But the point of departure of that particular kind of relationship or relational activity is each time, every time, completely different than the next.
Perfect ending. And the only relationship that matters is relationship with your own structure. Nurture that, and you will see how the world around you changes. Thank you very much for coming. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.